So what? So we hang on. Okay, so then here we are. Just a second. Could do something. Okay, so here we are going through. I mean, ostensibly we're talking about the 6 perfections, but what I've been trying to do is put them in the framework of the whole path, you know, and trying to sort of, I mean, I think the thing is again, repeatedly I'm saying, but to try and really understand these teachings in level, according to levels of capability, you know. I mean, this 6 perfections is actually stating the final stages of the Bodhisattva's path. I mean, the assumption is already you've achieved bodhicitta. So we look at the points of the path, you know. So just to remind us again, the very first entry level practice, immediate, starting this second, as Lama Zopa says, the first thing to do is stop harming others. So the logic for this is the very first level. Buddha recommends these 10 little don'ts, you know. Why? Because he says that, you know, given that we're driven by delusions, then the actions we do with our body and speech are driven by delusions, and they're the ones that'll cause us future suffering. So the whole first level of practice is abiding by the laws of karma, understanding karma, living in vows, purifying every day, kind of getting ahead of the game a bit. Next level, you start to look at your mind. Now you've controlled the servants of your mind to some degree, your body and speech, and now we can look at the mind. We become our own therapist, as Lama Yeshe says. We study in great depth, or to, the way the mind works. Buddha's very specific, very unique approach to what the mind is and how it functions. This is fundamental. We can't really be a Buddhist if we don't understand his view of the mind. And then from this we get renunciation. This is the first of the 3 principal aspects of the path. Practicing the first and second scopes, I like to call junior school and high school. From this comes renunciation. Renunciation of suffering and its causes. Who's suffering? You're suffering. So you've got to kind of dig deep in and see the levels of suffering that we have. You know, this is often what we miss in the West. We think, oh, it sounds selfish. It's totally necessary. On the basis of this, we now go to the Bodhisattva path. If we were on the Hinayana path, we wouldn't go to the Bodhisattva path. We would stay at high school with first and second scopes. We'd then get concentration and realize emptiness, and eventually achieve our own nirvana in one life or other. And then we would, at the end of that life, we wouldn't come back. We would have achieved liberation. But we're on the Mahayana path, so we don't achieve liberation yet. We go onto the Bodhisattva path. Well, we might have by then, but it's not in the stages. So then we go to the Mahayana component and we cultivate bodhicitta. We go through the, you know, these different techniques of achieving bodhicitta, the 6 causes and 1 effect, and another one called what's it called? The more radical one, where you're learning to exchange yourself for others. So they both culminate in bodhicitta. Now and what that is once you've got it, not just some kind of brief moment, it's the culmination of this extraordinary practice of love, compassion, great compassion, and so on. And so then the final, you finally go to the 6 perfections, and this is where you've got the bodhicitta, and now for life after life after life, as long as it takes you, you're going to bop along through life after life, consciously driven by this bodhicitta, this intense compassion for the suffering of sentient beings, and helping the 2 parts of bodhicitta. One is this automatic thought to only benefit whoever's in front of you. There's no other thought. There's no thought of I. And secondly, the long-term goal is never giving up life after life, connecting with sentient beings, practicing these 6 perfections, so that finally you become a Buddha. So the first 4, which we've talked about so far, also last week we talked about this, you know, we went through those 8 verses, which is actually what you would talk about when you did bodhicitta, but I think it's good to put it in here, and we talked a bit about that. So then we got the first perfection is the perfection of generosity. Then the second is morality or ethics. The third is patience, and the fourth is perseverance. We went through these. So, and these 2 are gradual. Generosity is Tsongkhapa says in his Songs of Experience, is the wish-fulfilling jewel with which you can fulfill the hopes of all sentient beings. It's the basis of the activity of the Bodhisattva. It's the basis, the first one, that becomes the kind of the cause for you to want to benefit others. You start by wanting to give. Give what? Give what you have. Like I said last week, you perfect that when you give your body, like the story of Harry. You know, so we're talking kind of dramatic levels here. The next is morality, but the whole path actually is morality. The whole path is the practice of ethics. But there's two different levels, and this is a crucial one to understand. All the first stages of Buddhism, all the first stages of the first and second scopes, junior school and high school, particularly, that's called the morality of restraint. In particular, the strictest one of merely not killing, not stealing, not lying, not this, not that. There's not much wriggle room, you know. It's a discipline of living in vows and purifying your karma. You get to the Bodhisattva path and you get to the Bodhisattva vows, and they're much more dramatic, much more profound, but they're still the ethics of restraint, not harming others. But the first level of vows, what underpins those is the wish not to suffer. The second level, the Bodhisattva, are more dramatic insofar as what drives these vows is the wish to benefit others. They're more advanced than the first level. So, for example, in the first level, you just don't kill, don't steal, don't lie. Still, the motivation would make a difference in terms of the karma you create, but basically it's just, by the very killing itself, there's still some negativity there. This is the Theravada, this is the Hinayana approach. Now, the Bodhisattva vows are way more powerful insofar as they're driven by the motivation. So even in those vows, you have a vow to break an earlier vow, if it is for the benefit of others. So what drives the Bodhisattva vows is to refrain from certain actions, and there are 46 of them or something. And interestingly, so what drives those is not to do this and not to do that and not to do this and not to do that. A vow is a decision to not do something, but they're underpinned by the motivation. So killing is killing in the pratimoksha level, but here you could, the Bodhisattva, the person who's on this path, on this, the one of cultivating living in these vows, if you can't play around with these, you can break an earlier vow if it is truly driven by compassion for the other person. So we can't just pretend that, I'll kill you because I've got compassion. No, but they're much more profound in that sense. And they're all about how to help others. They're all training us, by living in the Bodhisattva vows, we're training ourselves to make what's best for others to be the thing that drives us. So again, you can't do this until you've lived in the patimoksha vows. You can't, until you've got discipline over your crazy body and speech. It is not possible to actually think, I'm going to do this so I can be of benefit to others. I'll refrain from this so I can benefit others. I will do this because it's more beneficial for others. We've got to first work out what's beneficial for us. Now it's more profound. But these are still the vows of morality of restraint. Now you get to the 6 perfections, and we practice here the second perfection, which is the practice of ethics, morality. And this is now proactively benefiting others. And the assumption is, of course, it's based on wisdom, We benefit, we try to help. We've got compassion, but we haven't done enough work to really be confident that our compassion is valid. As His Holiness Dalai Lama says, you could say that compassion is the point of the whole path, but as he says, compassion is not enough. You've got to have wisdom. And that means you've got to put yourself together first, I mean, we can see right now, because we haven't really developed, we haven't got much renunciation. We don't really know our minds that well. Most of us probably couldn't even give a definition of what attachment is, what anger is, what jealousy is, what love is. We haven't studied the mind enough, And because we're driven by these delusions and they're mixed together like a big soup with all our virtues, it's extremely hard for us to distinguish between them. And this is the fundamental job of being a Buddhist, to distinguish between delusions and virtues. This is an intensely hard job. We do not think of Buddhism like that, but that's the heart of being a Buddhist. So right now, we're enormously compassionate. Let's talk a bit about this before we get to the next perfections. We're incredibly compassionate. People have so much compassion. Help others. People have so much compassion. They see suffering. They're in tears, But what we don't realize until we're quite advanced is that it's so much of it is driven by our attachment. I mean, look at the way we have compassion for our little pussy, cat, and doggy, And what do? Because it's suffering, we go kill it. We really do mean well. We really do mean well. But as Lama Zopa says, meaning well is not enough. So what we don't realize, this is what's fascinating. If you're driven by compassion, it's a virtue. And virtues cannot cause you suffering. It's an impossibility. This is a revelation for us. We don't understand this in the way we understand the mind. What causes us suffering, distress, despair, anxiety, worry, depression, what causes us to be worried when we see suffering is not compassion. It's the delusions, mostly attachment. That's why we kill our dog. We think it's compassion. Okay, in our culture, there's no concept of reincarnation. So it seems pretty, it seems on the face of it pretty kind to kill your dog because you want to stop its suffering. But that's just that really is so limited compassion in the Buddhist perspective. You've got to have compassion. You've got to have wisdom. And that's really, in the most simple sense, what that means is, and you know perfectly well yourself, in ordinary actions in daily life, if you know there's a likelihood of a fairly dire result of an action you do, you've really got to check up carefully. You can't just say you meant well. You can't just tell your 3-year-old daughter to run across the road without checking if any car's coming. Oh, I meant well. Well, I'm happy you did. It didn't help your daughter. I might have a headache. And you're so compassionate, and you are compassionate, and you give me a pill. Take the pill, Robina, but you're not sure if it's the cyanide or the aspirin. And then I'm dying in agony. Oh, I meant well, Robina. Well, thanks a lot. Let me keep my headache, please. But we don't have that kind of view because we've got attachment, and attachment is this kind of little vampire in us. I'm sounding very brutal, I always do, but attachment is this hungry little vampire in us that can't stand problems. Attachment is a junkie that only wants everything to be nice. So it sounds very cruel, but when we look at this, we'll recognize it. Often what we do to help others is driven by our own finding the suffering unbearable. So we stick our nose in and suggest all these different methods, but we don't have enough wisdom to see if it's beneficial. We can't stand to see suffering. So we think that's compassion. No, that's attachment. So did I tell you? I told the story about Harry falling off the mountain. Did I tell this other story about Harry and Lama Yeshe and the monk who got sick? Did I tell you that story? Okay, this is a perfect example of a compassionate action driven by wisdom. And this is very humbling because the level of wisdom that's necessary here to really help a particular person, we don't have that, And that's why I think I've heard many times that the Buddha says you've got to have clairvoyance before you really have enough wisdom to help people. And that's completely abstract for us. What's clairvoyance, Well, we're going to talk about that. That comes when we get single point of concentration, the fifth perfection. So this story also about Harry, the one who fell off the mountain. He was at Kopan. This is back in the early 80s, I would say, even late 70s. Yeah, late 70s. And he was a monk at the time, and he was trying to help one of the monks there, the Sherpas, who was very sick. And he found a doctor to help the monk. And he happened to mention to Lama Yeshe, because Lama Yeshe is a guru, and Lama Yeshe is the boss of Kopan. He said, he told Lama Yeshe he'd found a doctor to help the monk. And Lama just said to Harry, it's okay, he doesn't need a doctor, he'll be fine, let it be. So Harry, trusting Lama's wisdom, because he's his guru, he didn't get a doctor. Well, Harry continued to observe that this monk got sicker and sicker. And eventually he went back up to the mountains. He's a Sherpa, and he died. Now, on the face of it, it sounds like Lama Yeshe is very cruel, doesn't it? He didn't let Harry get a doctor to fix the monk. Well, Lama Lundrup, the abbot, told Harry, he said, well, because Lama has got clairvoyance, and this is the minimum requirement. The Buddha would say, we've had this in countless lifetimes. We've had single point of concentration in countless lifetimes. We've had clairvoyance. And clairvoyance is not some hippie trippy thing, It's a clear level of realization that we accomplish, starting with when we get single point of concentration. And this is invented by the Hindus more than 3,000 years ago. So this is completely a normal part of the Buddhist view of the mind, although it's mysterious to us because we don't posit these subtle levels of mind. We're going to discuss this when we get to the fifth perfection. So minimum requirement is clairvoyance. But not only that, but realization of emptiness and bodhicitta, highly evolved being, Lama Yeshe. So in other words, Lama Lundrup told Harry that Lama could see very clearly the karma, exactly the karma this monk created. Whenever it was, 47 lives, doesn't matter what it is. He had the wisdom to see the past and know exactly the cause of this particular suffering of the monk. He could also see that if he had got a doctor, he would have gotten better and he would have had a fine life. But he wouldn't have purified this particular karma, and so then next life he would have much more suffering. Whereas by purifying it now, by being sick and then dying, he completely purified the karma. Next life, fantastic. That is a perfect story to show the kind of wisdom that we really need to get in order to really benefit others. We should be embarrassed by that. We just rush in. Whenever we see sickness, we rush in because yes, we do have compassion, but what we don't realize until we've done the work on our minds, that it's driven much by our attachment, because attachment is a junkie that can't stand problems. That's it. That's why, you know, many people, either there's two kinds of people I always think about. They're the kind of the quiet, patient people, and then the angry, volatile people. I mean, it's not really a way of dividing all the people, but think of this. So I remember a friend of mine who was a kind of patient kind of person. Her energy is very patient. And she was really into the environment, you know, which is the way the current political views are, is that the environmentalism was a huge effort, a huge one. So she would, you know, she'd get incredible anxiety. She couldn't even open her eyes when she's driving with her husband, you know, because she could see the trees, and then she started to have all these things about the whole universe is dying, and she just could not cope. She'd have panic attacks, you know. Now, this is what's interesting. For her, in other words, she's got compassion. There's no question. She's got a huge heart. But her attachment, this is something we've got to understand. Her attachment, like everybody, when it sees the thing that it doesn't want, which is the terrible environment, the attachment part of it is what made her go berserk, not compassion. Attachment can't stand problems. Now, a person like me back in the 60s and 70s, when I was a political activist, I didn't get panic attacks. I just got out there and shouted and yelled and screamed and tried to beat the world to death, you know, sort of to force the world to do what I thought was beneficial. So that was in other words, I had attachment for the world to be the way I wanted it. There was also compassion. You cannot doubt that. But it was polluted by my attachment. So my attachment, when I didn't get what I wanted, I turned into a kind of a very, you know, radical activist, a radical political activist, going to demonstrations, shouting and yelling, accusing all the people of the world, screaming, yelling, shouting, because that was my response. So many of you will be like my friend. You'll be patient, and you'll get depressed and despair when you see suffering. Not because of compassion, honeys. It's because of attachment. Because attachment's a junkie that only wants the nice things. When we can understand this, it is a revelation for us. But this, again, is all based upon what we learn in the middle scope, in the wisdom wing. This is based upon the clear understanding of the way the mind functions. You know, the mind has deluded, neurotic, ridiculous, I-based thoughts, which are based in fear, attachment being basically the main one in the life. And then you've got the virtues, and they're completely and totally different, you know. But we don't have that view in modern psychology. So we just see all the bits and pieces of our mind, we give them all equal status. So Buddha's view is so radically different. And once we understand this distinction, it informs the whole path for us, you know. So the bodhisattvas, or even before bodhisattva, once you've done some work on your mind, and you know, when you see suffering, it increases your energy to want to help others, instead of, oh my God, this is unbearable, I can't stand it, or who's to blame, you know. Or every time a bodhisattva sees suffering, it strengthens their wish to never give up, to become a Buddha so they can benefit others. Their compassion is unbelievably powerful, you know. Okay, so this is discussing, what was I discussing? The second perfection. The second one, morality. So it's the proactive benefiting others. First, generosity, give whatever sentient beings need. Now it's do whatever they need to be of benefit to them, you know. And this is, remember, at this level, this is in your mind all the time. You're like a mother. I mean, mothers all the time. A mother will see her baby drowning. She doesn't forget she's the mother. She knows it's her job to go into the water. She doesn't look around wondering who's going to save this baby. She just knows it's her job. It's a good way to put the bodhisattvas. They just know it's their job, you know, automatically. And they have the courage. And I mean, this level of compassion is unbelievably powerful. The way we talk about compassion is very sentimental, you know, not being rude about us. And it's polluted by our delusions, polluted by our, and we can see, I mean, so, you know, you can have one compassion for a butterfly and you'll save the butterfly. Or a moth, let's say, you might be very compassionate. But if you've got 1,000 moths in your house, I don't think we'd have the courage to spend weeks and weeks releasing every tiny moth. We'd say, oh no, I can't help it, there's too many, you know. We're happy to save one ant, but not 1,000. So I remember this wonderful story, Pemo, one of our nuns, Venerable Pemo, who's a meditator, who was up in our center in the bush, not in the bush, don't call it that in America, up in the mountains in California on the coast. Near Big Sur, you've got to walk 5 hours to get there. It's right up in the mountains. Lama Zopa said, some person offered to Lama Zopa, it's this retreat center. I forgot what it's called. Calm abiding, a place of calm abiding. And Pemo spent ages there meditating. So she apparently, I forget exactly the story, she had all her sacks of food, you know, because you've got to pile your food up there. And anyway, whatever some creature, I don't know, was a moth some little creepy thing before? Were they little kind of wormy things before? Does anybody know? Anyway, she suddenly was overrun by moths. And she spent weeks, Rinpoche was so moved, she spent weeks, getting a little container like this, grabbing, catching the moth, Om Mani Padme Hum, releasing it. Weeks. That's the perseverance one, which we talked last week, Never giving up. Never giving up, no matter how long it takes. But we give up because we're lazy and we want comfort, So our compassion is limited, in other words. And we just need to see this, that's all. And so we go to these levels. So the morality one is this incredible wish to be a benefit to others, but of course, based on wisdom. That's a pretty tough one. Then the next one is patience, like we talked. I think we mustn't spend too much time on patience. We did a bit, but it's a very, very intense one, patience. Like I think I might have mentioned for us, we confuse it with passive aggression. Kind of gritting our teeth, and waiting for that horrible thing to go away. That is not patience. Patience is a very brave, big, courageous attitude that when a problem comes, you greet it. This is intense. I mean, practice it once a week, please, at least. It's intense because everything in our being of attachment is this junkie that has a panic attack when the problem comes. And that becomes anger, or like my friend, internalized anger, depression and despair, So patience is massive. Whatever it is, you confront it, you see it, you open, you welcome it. And then the final one, the most intense of the fourth of these four, and if you could say that these four are the perfection of the compassion wing. And the last two are the perfection of the wisdom wing. So this perseverance is the one that just doesn't give up, no matter how long it takes, You would never want to harm a single sentient being. So how long it takes to get those moths out, you'd take it. Because you're driven by this powerful compassion. There's no question. You wouldn't, like we just give up because we're too exhausted. So the last two. Okay. So these are now the wisdom component. And these two, if you're on the Hinayana path, you would have done these two back when you got renunciation. You would have added those to your path. You'd get some concentration, then you'd realize emptiness, and you get out of here. You achieve your nirvana. But here on the Mahayana path, they're kind of delayed, if you like, and they're presented at the end of the Bodhisattva path. I think I've heard, this is a very interesting point. When we look into, we're going to do this today, we'll go to concentration. And some of the qualities you'd accomplish having accomplished single-pointed concentration. So one of the qualities, and Lama Yeshe really talks about this in Mahamudra, in his wonderful book on how to realize the emptiness of the mind, Mahamudra. And Lama was always so direct and open. They often don't talk about these kinds of things in the text. He would talk about the marvelous results that you would accomplish. And one of the key results, I think I should read to you. I'm going to read to you from Lama Yeshe, okay, just to get you really inspired. So, but first, before we do that, let's talk about single point of concentration. And I'll explain in a minute why it's put at the end of the path, where in fact, these are Hinayana practices. Emptiness in its nature is Hinayana. It's not Mahayana. But when it's combined with bodhicitta, that's when the whole thing is more powerful. And concentration, of course, it's a Hindu technique. Buddha got it from the Hindus, Okay, so what is single point of concentration, or what is shamatha? It's I think this is translated, the Sanskrit is translated as calm abiding. Calm abiding is the one that's most commonly used. It's a kind of single pointed concentration. There's levels of single pointed concentration. So it's so this technique to accomplish it is what, the Hindus more than 3,000 years ago cultivated this. And so Singapore, there's this level of calm abiding, this level of concentration. All we can do is try to imagine it, because it's absolutely got nothing to do with what we think of concentration now. Because the best we can get is concentration, but it's based at a conceptual level, it's the level we're functioning at with our sensory and our conceptual mind working. But when you've got the single point of concentration, you could argue, you can see a person in full development of single point of concentration meditating, they look like they're dead. They've gone completely beyond the sensory, beyond the gross level of the conceptuality. And they've got this effortless capacity to have the mind on whatever they wish, those words just convey nothing to us because we just can't imagine it. We can't, because there's nothing equivalent in modern psychology. So the whole process of cultivating it. You know, it's described in 9 stages of cultivation. So even when you read in the Lam Rim, like in Pabonka Rinpoche, liberation in the palm of your hand, some of the prerequisites for even being ready to get to the mountains before you even begin to get single point of concentration, most of us wouldn't qualify, you know. You've got to already be a pretty subdued practitioner. I remember in 1995 when I started editing Mandala, when I first came to the States in 94, I came. Well, I'd been here before, but when I settled in the States in 94, and then I took on editing Mandala in 95. Our first issue came out in 95 that I was doing. I remember one of the first stories we did, I interviewed Venerable Rene, the Swiss monk, and he's based in California. Some of you know him. And he's a professional meditator the last 40 years, you know. So this is back in 95. I interviewed him at Kopan Monastery about his, I think it was 2.5 years. I really can't remember now. A couple of years, and he was attempting to get single point of concentration. So I remember Pabonka Rinpoche in Liberation, he says, if you're really qualified, you might get it in 6 months. So it shows, you know. And this is a person, so Venerable Rene said, there was no way in the world he could have been ready to even get to the conditions where he would start his serious retreat without having first become a monk, studied for years, done lots and lots of practices, and even himself having taught the Dharma. He said without all of that as a background, he would not have been possible to spend time, to even enter into the retreat. Because if you're thinking about it, you know, you need to be in an isolated place, as the ideal scenario, an isolated place where you're doing single point of concentration. You don't do any other meditation. You just do this one, you know. So I remember Pabonka lists a whole bunch of criteria just to be qualified. You've got to, for example, have complete indifference to food. I mean, we are so beyond neurosis when it comes to our food, and everybody in the world has some kind of disease, some kind of allergy, some kind of problem, some kind of gluten, this. And I mean, but to be at the point where you would have absolutely no interest in any kind of, whatever you're given, you'd be content with it, you know. One thing, you've given up all the worldly desires. I mean, you can see yourself, it's very clear. We can't even concentrate for 5 minutes because why? Because of the kids and the mortgage and the husband and the dramas and the work and the things, that the amount of stuff in our lives. This is not criticizing us, it's just showing us, you know. So even when you first get to retreat, it takes ages to even calm the mind down, to even stop having all those endless thoughts that we just completely are occupied with our daily lives, you know. There's so many qualifications. So he said that he maybe in those 2.5 years, maybe he said in the first 6 months he achieved maybe the 5th of the 9 stages, and it took him another 1.5 years. I can't remember now, but he said he felt he couldn't go any further, so he gave up after 2.5 years being there. I mean, he's continued to retreat ever since. But there's one thing that's interesting too. One of the best things they say, the type of place to get concentration, the best place is to be where it's blessed by the previous presence of holy beings, you know, previous meditators, whatever. And this is a very interesting point. This retreat, he did it at Ursel Ling, place of clear light, which is the place related to where Lama Ursel got born. Lama Yeshe's reincarnation. His parents were running the center at the time. It's this place up in the mountains in Sierra Nevada, near Granada in Spain. And I remember I was there in 82 when His Holiness was there, and he said it was, he named it Ursel Ling, and he said it really reminded him of Tibet. Very beautiful. Even the little houses there, little stone, little kind of cottages, stone, little kind of almost like caves, you know. So he did his 2.5 year retreat there. And he said, and I was interviewing him at Kopan, which is, anybody's been to Kopan Monastery, it's on a hill outside Kathmandu, and it's very busy, you know. It used to be not so busy, but now it's all the suburbs down below. You hear the 4 o'clock in the morning, all the Hindu prayers as loud as possible because they're trying to bless everybody with their prayers. The dogs barking. There's so much noise. But Venerable Rene said there was no question that his mind got more subtle more easily at Kopan than in this ideal scenario in Spain, because it's a very powerfully blessed place. All the lamas are just blissful about Kathmandu. When we get there, all we see is this filthy, polluted place. All they see is this blissful place blessed by the presence of holy beings for centuries, you know. So that was I think it's a very powerful point. His mind got more subtle more easily at this busy place because it was holy. Very interesting. But he also said too, and this is the beginnings of, I'm going to read you from Lama Yeshe's Mahamudra about some of the qualities you would accomplish, having accomplished single point of concentration. Harry said, no, Harry, all these holy beings I know, I mix them in my mind, Harry and Renee, they're all holy. So Renee, he said there was no doubt, the fifth of the nine, he got to the fifth, of the 9 levels. He said something like this: there was no question, but that the joy he experienced in his mind was so superior to any joy he'd ever experienced through his senses. So this is where I think it's so important to understand. Again, this is back to high school now, back to the middle school, where we study the mind, where we have to learn to distinguish between the delusions, the virtues, the delusions and the virtues. This is the job of being a Buddhist, all the way from here to Buddha. You have to learn to distinguish between what to cultivate, which is the virtues, and what to let go of, which is the delusions. This is the job. It's huge. So if you don't even know theoretically the difference between these different states of mind, how can you possibly do this job? So one of our biggest problems, is the confusion, is the confusion between the state of mind called pleasure, happiness, joy, pleasant feelings, which feel, okay, I don't know if I mentioned this, I can't remember, but it's worth talking about here in relation to concentration, which is our topic tonight. Next week will be emptiness. In the Buddhist view of the mind, that in the psychological model of the mind, you got the epistemological model, which is the way the mind functions, which is totally fascinating. And here you've got now we have the psychological model, which is the contents of our mind. So we've got 3 categories, precisely, no fourth. There are those that are disturbing, neurotic, delusional, ridiculous, fear-based, I-based. We are so familiar with them. We think they're normal parts of a normal person. Anger, jealousy, depression, anxiety, attachment, blah, 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 name them. These are the delusions. Buddha has found, amazingly, that we can get rid of these. They're not at the core of our being. This is the whole job of being a Buddhist. Then you've got the virtues, the positive states of mind, love, compassion, and these are not delusional. They are not disturbing. They are not distressing. And they're valid because they're reasonably in sync with reality. Delusions just lead us up garden paths. Delusions are just ridiculous. But because we don't have any view like this in modern culture, in modern psychology, it's hard to hear this unless you really study the mind properly. Now you've got the third category, which is most interesting. They're called neutral, which misleads us because they sound like they're not important. It doesn't mean that. It means they're neither neurotic, deluded, ridiculous, based in fear, nor are they virtuous in their character, which means we need to understand what Buddha means by virtuous and non-virtuous. We don't like those words in psychology. That sounds like kind of punitive. We've got to understand this. Then this third category are neither negative nor positive, but they're utterly crucial states of mind. And it's in single-pointed concentration that you utilize these parts of your mind and hone them to an incredible degree. So one of them is called concentration. One is called mindfulness. This is huge. We put all these bells and whistles on mindfulness. It's simply in the third category. I call them the mechanics of the mind. It's neither negative nor positive, utterly vital, utterly necessary, but it doesn't have the character of being virtuous, nor the character of being non-virtuous. So it's whatever you use it for. So in other words, as Lama Zopa says, thieves need mindfulness. I mean, we're shocked to hear that because we have this other view of mindfulness as being some holy virtuous state of mind. No, it's just simply learning to not forget what you're doing moment by moment. Well, a murderer needs that. A thief needs that. Listen to it. Animals have it. There's one called discrimination, which is an incredibly important state of mind, that millisecond by millisecond is necessary to distinguish even between this and this and this and this and this. And finally, to really practice Dharma and to really learn to distinguish between virtues and non-virtues, this is a major one. You have to learn to distinguish. I mean, an eagle or something, half a mile in the sky, has got much better discrimination than we have. They can see exactly the fish that they want to eat for breakfast, and they zoom in with their concentration and their good memory. So this is the third category. Now, the point I'm getting at here is this. In this third category, I don't remember if we talked about this. Does anybody remember if we did? Andrew, do you remember? Sorry. I'm going to talk about it again anyway. Never mind, even if I did. So, okay. the point I'm getting at, one of these states of mind in this third category is called feeling, but not in the way we call emotions. And we only have three kinds of feeling. This is the Buddhist analysis. We have feelings that are pleasant, feelings that are unpleasant, and feelings that are neither. Well, forget the neutral ones. We are all concerned about the pleasant and the unpleasant. So what are other words for these? Happy feelings, joyful feelings, blissful feelings, ecstatic feelings, rapturous feelings. I mean, she talks about this. I'm going to read to you. So, in other words, pleasant feeling you got from the spectrum of the mildest moment of some slight pleasure to the most intense level of bliss, right? They're called pleasant feelings. They're neither negative nor positive. This is the kind of discrimination we have to learn to understand the contents of our mind. So now the point is this, Buddha's entire point. His point is, we are now in samsara, okay? That means we're driven by attachment. Attachment is in the first category. It's this emotional hunger, this neurotic, frantic, I-based, fear-based, desperate craving to get what I want every second, to get only the nice things. And then the millisecond it doesn't get them, it gets anger and blah, blah, blah. Like we know, depression, all this spectrum of anger. So now the point is this, with this body we've got, this body of the five senses, which is the result of karmically of countless lifetimes of attachment, we created this body with 5 holes, and these 5 holes demand feeding, don't they? So attachment's job is to find the external object, pretty much, the object of our senses, to find whatever object of our senses that we have got some karma with, such that when we have contact with it, it triggers pleasant feelings. So now Buddha's telling us, hey guys, you're up the creek without a paddle. This is not the way to get pleasure. This is not the way to get happiness. But we can't hear this. It sounds like holy, Basically, this is the problem. He is saying, you people really believe that happy feelings, happiness, and before I go further, when we say happiness, because we're so addicted to the outside world being the cause of happiness, that we even conflate the event with the happiness. So if you tell me about your happiness, you'll tell me about the handsome boyfriend. You won't mention your happiness. You don't even know how to describe your happy feelings. You'll just describe the event because you think that's happiness. Now, if you have a terrible experience and you describe your suffering, your unpleasant feelings, your suffering, you'll describe the event. So this is the biggest mistake we make. So we completely conflate, we mix attachment and pleasant feelings, attachment and happiness. There's a total connection as far as we're concerned. Buddha says we've completely got it wrong. It's like a technical point. So basically what he's saying is, you think that happy feelings are what you get when you get what attachment wants. And that's how we spend our lives. And there's a truth in it. It's true. When you get that cake, you do get happy feelings, but we assume the cake is the main cause of the happy feelings. That's the mistake we make. This is the mistake we've been making for eons. So now, happy feelings, Buddha says, hey guys, I've got a method. What he has found is that happy feelings, bliss, ecstasy, joy, pleasure, in the mind, the mental consciousness, are what you get when you give up attachment. We're doing the exact opposite of what Buddha recommends, So happy feelings, happiness is referring not to an event. A cake is not happiness. That's absurd. Happiness is a feeling in this way Buddhism describes. And there's levels of happy feelings, So now when you get single point of concentration, I'm going to describe from Lama, you get such blissful feelings, you can't even imagine it. But they all say, and it's in Lama Yeshe saying this too, that because it's not driven by attachment, it's completely peaceful, it's completely calm, it's not frantic, Look at the pleasure we get. I don't want to be too personal, but look at some of the levels of pleasure humans get, especially in contact with each other. It's like the most intense, out of control pleasure. There's no mind. I mean, to say the mind is peaceful is like a joke. Even when you're slightly thirsty, just a drink of water can make your mind berserk. So, what we are learning to do, the consequence of giving up delusions, the consequence of stopping harming others is already happiness. is already happiness, happy feelings. You get less, when you're less angry, less attached, less depressed, less anxious, harm people less, you are becoming more happy. You're having more happy feelings. This is literally the way Buddha's talking. So happy feelings are neither negative nor positive. You've got to hear, and that means you've got to understand what Buddha means by those two terms. Otherwise, it's just confusing to us, you know. Lama Yeshe used to say, the more pleasure, the better, dear. Because you could see with all a bunch of crazy hippies, when he first met hippies, the Westerners, that he said, you people don't even know how to be happy. Or you know how to be miserable, you know. Because we conflate happiness with attachment. When we start to become Buddhists, and then as Lama Zopa says, because we confuse these two, he says, when, you know, we hear the Buddha says to get happiness, you've got to give up attachment. Oh, we go, oh, really? I've got to give up my heart? I've got to give up my happiness, because we think they're the same. Totally not. But we don't understand this until we study it, you know. We can't just make this stuff up. So let me get you Lama Yeshe's book, and I'll try and get you excited to show you how marvelous your mind is and the potential your mind has. Let me find the book, Mahamudra. The Lamas don't normally talk like this, but Lama wanted to make us happy. He wanted to get us excited. He wanted to inspire us to practice, you know. He'd like to tell us the end result to get us a bit excited. Okay, here we go. Okay, here we go. So I'll read a few things. Mahamudra, How to Discover Our True Nature. I really recommend you read it and study it. Okay, so where are we? The benefits of samadhi. Samadhi means concentration. So concentration is a broader term that includes calm abiding. The benefits of samadhi are incredible. All right, Mahamudra. So basically Mahamudra is this technique that was kept secret for centuries, and it comes back to the Panchen Lama, the first Panchen Lama, and he was the first one who wrote it down, and then this text is taught, you know. And it's basically it's using the two modes of meditation, which we're discussing here in the Six Perfections. The first one being single point of concentration, and the second one being, and that's shamatha, and the second one being special insight, which is vipassana, Sanskrit. So that's the one where we're going to look at emptiness. That's next week. But you've got to get concentration to do that. So Mahamudra is a particular technique of using the mind itself as your object of concentration, and then as a method for realizing the emptiness, first of the self and then of the mind itself. It's a particular technique. So now, without calm abiding, we cannot realize. So Mahamudra is his term, and it's referring to emptiness, the ultimate way things exist. Without calm abiding, we cannot realize Mahamudra. So as I mentioned, to achieve the realization of Mahamudra, you know, the reality of non-duality, emptiness, this is wisdom, you know, we first need to develop calm abiding. In fact, it is not possible without it. We must achieve the subtler levels of consciousness of indestructible one-pointed concentration, what in Sanskrit we call samadhi. It is difficult to realize non-duality, not because it's hiding from us, but because our concepts are so thick. So we must refine our concepts. We must achieve subtle mindfulness, subtle awareness, and subtle clarity. Otherwise, there is no way we can see the unconscious levels of ego grasping an independent self. Not possible. Because you see, this concentration, you get, which Islam is going to describe, you get to these levels of subtlety of the mind, as I said, we don't even posit in the world, that are beyond conceptual, beyond the sensory, are so subtle, so refined. You can't, I mean, as Islam is going to talk, the qualities we can't even imagine. So samadhi is the source of liberation. Without perfect samadhi, there's perfect single point of concentration, there's no way to become liberated from samsara and no way to achieve enlightenment. There is no exception, whether we're Christian, Muslim, Hindu, or Buddhist. To cut the dualistic view, we need calm abiding. But calm abiding is not enough. On the other hand, some people actually think that this state of samadhi, this one-pointed concentration, is all we need in order to cut ego. Now that's, you see, at this point is exactly where Buddha diverged from the Hindus. These genius, amazing yogis, the ones, as His Holiness said, were the ones who first began the investigation into the nature of self more than 3,000 years ago. They're incredible. They cut all the grosser levels of suffering, but they went as far as what they'd call the formless realm, where they had this such subtle level of mental absorption, and that for them was liberation. But that's where Buddha diverged. He says, no, there's still delusions in the mind. You're still in samsara. You still haven't cut the root delusion. So we need to develop special insight, or vipassana in Sanskrit. Now, in the world, we hear about vipassana, and that term is usually referring to particular techniques in the Theravadan tradition. It's all Buddha's teachings of how to get insight. And so one of the first techniques that everybody learns is you by concentrating on the different sensations of the body. Buddha's wish is that we get insight into impermanence, how things are changing. But the one we're discussing here is insight into emptiness. It's a more advanced one. It's all Buddha's teachings, it's the same. But vipassana is not just this one technique that we tend to hear about in the world. It's called vipassana. So we can interpret this to mean, so okay, we also need to develop special insight, or vipassana in Sanskrit. In Tibetan, we call it hlak tong. Hlak meaning extra, tong meaning seeing. We can interpret this to mean that we go beyond seeing conventional reality and achieve the extra seeing of the universal reality of Mahamudra. In other words, we need the two kinds of meditation together, calm abiding and special insight. And these are the last two of the 6 perfections. But like I said before, these are Hinayana teachings. They're not Mahayana in their character. But I've heard, because when you see the qualities that you're going to accomplish, this incredible bliss, if you can accomplish this before bodhicitta, the danger is that you'll forget about sentient beings completely. So this is why it's taught after bodhicitta, because what drives the bodhisattvas and what drives them to get concentration is this incredible compassion. So they can never lose sight of suffering. They won't ever get lost in the bliss. The benefits of samadhi are incredible. So nevertheless, even without special insight, the results of samadhi alone are unbelievable, almost unimaginable. When we understand this, when we realize how amazing the results are, we cannot help but to try to develop it. There is no way we become lazy. We will have much energy and make great effort. We won't even worry about eating. I will explain some of the benefits. You go beyond sensory and conceptual consciousness. As your concentration develops, you'll go beyond your body. Your mind will be non-conceptual, so it becomes easy to cut the complex world of the 5 sense objects, to eliminate all the superstitions. That's one of the many words that Lama often uses, but it's actually one of the synonyms for delusions, for the neuroses, They are literally superstitions. Believing a cake will make you happy is a superstition. It's just not true. So in such a unified state, your mind becomes so subtle, so sharp, you can easily eradicate the complex dualistic thoughts. You can touch reality. This is the feature of samadhi. And out of meditation, you can easily deal with your delusions. They are so light, you can stop them immediately. Now, when we understand how heavy our delusions are, and it takes us weeks and months and years to learn to get rid of just a bit of anger, and we almost think they're so strong, we almost think they're so concrete, they're part of who we really are, because we have no concentration. Our minds are completely berserk. So can you imagine the second a delusion arises, you can completely deal with it right there. I mean, it's almost hard to imagine the possibility of that. You experience bliss. In the subtle state of concentration, you experience bliss, ecstatic bliss, just naturally. Please hear these words literally, not some fantasy religious concept. The Buddha's a psychologist. The more concentration you have, the more integrated you are, and thus the more rapture, the more bliss you experience. In the beginning, the bliss you experience is physical, which is the grosser level. But as your concentration deepens, as you throw off the layers of blankets of grosser consciousness, you experience bliss exclusively at the mental level. This is because you have stopped perceiving the objects of the 5 senses. You have closed the door to all the delusions. All the contradictory concepts have disappeared. Your mind is now crystal clear. This is just like science fiction for us, isn't it? Your therapist won't tell you about this. Your neuroscientist will not tell you about this. Your mind. So now, if it's as if next heading, as if you could count every atom. As your concentration gets stronger and you reach ever subtler levels, your mind becomes super powerful. From his own experience, Lama Tsongkhapa says that you can reach a point of such clarity in your meditation that your mind feels almost infinite. Your mind is so clear, so sharp, it's as if you can distinguish all the subtle physical energies. You'll have the courageous thought, I can count all the atoms of the universe. This level of mind is more powerful than even scientific instruments. Lama's not joking, okay? Just we don't have these techniques in our culture. And so because we don't have them, we think they're all made up rubbish, you know, we're so arrogant. You are always joyful. And just this alone is hilarious. When you arise from your meditation, you feel liberated instead of uncertain and full of doubts and conflicts. You experience inner peace. You always experience a happy, joyful vibration. In fact, you continuously experience tremendous pleasure. Now, the pleasure of chocolate is nothing to you. What you can now experience with your mind is super. It's like another realm, another dimension. And when your senses do come into contact with their objects, of course, you experience bliss then too. And the thing about this is, like I said before, the mind is super peaceful. It's got nothing to do with attachment. And that's why we have to understand first, even theoretically, the relationship between attachment and pleasure. We've got it totally wrong and have been doing this for eons. And this is what exactly leads us to continue to create negative karma, because we don't see the difference. You hardly even notice if it's night or day. Actually, even now, when you have samsaric happiness, you have a similar kind of experience. You dance and drink all night, intoxicated with the pleasure. Time just flies. Well, this is what happens when you're intoxicated with the blissful experience of samadhi. Your body feels so light. They call it, they say when you get concentrated, there's a special kind of level of what they call physical pliancy. I mean, Lama says in such a lovely way, you know, light, like a feather. When you are out of meditation, the heavy energy of your body vanishes. Your body feels like a brand new body. You feel so light, almost as if you could fly, almost as if you had no body at all. Your sleep is like meditation. Lama Tsongkhapa says that because you have developed such clarity in your concentration meditation, even in your dreams, your experience of the superstitions, your conceptions about the five sense objects will be much lighter. Your sleep will be like meditation. Normally, we experience heavy, impure projections in our dreams. But when we have good concentration, we can experience pure visions. You develop clairvoyance. Lama Tsongkhapa says that you will develop clairvoyance. According to the Abhidharma teachings, there are two levels of clairvoyance. One is what we understand as intuition, an untrained sense that we all have to some extent. For example, you might feel strongly, without any logical proof, that something has happened to your dear friend back home. The other can be gained by training the mind in meditation, as we are discussing here. You are able to see long distances, as well as other people, including their minds. This is the whole point of Lama Yeshe's story, Harry, you know. At first, your experiences seem a bit like a dream, but the more your concentration develops, the more clarity the more clearly you can see, just as you would if you were there in person. This kind of clairvoyance is not imagining something, it's real, in the present, not a fantasy. And that's because you've accessed a subtle level of cognition that we don't posit in our culture, that doesn't need a brain, you know. This is what these amazing Indians, more than 3,000 years, they discovered this. So there's some of the things you get if you get important concentration. So of course, here on the six perfections, you've already got bodhicitta. So, you know, there's no danger you'll forget about sentient beings. Any questions? No, nothing.
I had a quick question.
Yeah, good.
Going back to the example of the suffering dog.
Yeah.
Kind of practically speaking, if you don't have personally the wisdom or the clairvoyance, and maybe you don't have access to someone with that knowledge. If you do have a suffering dog or maybe a family member with cancer, and you don't really know what the karma is, or if you should let the karma play out or interfere, practically speaking, how do you go about that? Or
all we can do is rely on our compassion and all we can do is rely on our compassion and knowing that death is natural, knowing impermanence is natural, do everything in our power to help the person suffer as least as possible and bless their minds with the Dharma. So when they do die, at least they've got another decent human rebirth. And this is where the whole of that discussion of Lama Zopa's book, that's for ordinary people. We can't possibly do more than that. And that's where killing our animal because we think it's suffering is where we're intruding without wisdom, So given that we don't have wisdom, you can only do what wisdom you've got. So not to have fear of death, not to have fear of illness and sickness, knowing it's natural, and to be as loving and compassionate as possible and do whatever we can to help the person's mind as well as their body. That's the most precious thing. And that's where when people are sick and dying, at least we can try and have mantras playing, make their environment beautiful, love them, be compassionate so we can calm their minds down. And then and we know that they're purifying their karma, so we can help them navigate this suffering so that when they do die, they'll get a happy human rebirth. That's the best we can do, Andrew, isn't it? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. And as we get, if we have more wisdom, then okay, employ it, but we don't have much at all. Do you understand? But a major one in that, I think, is because when we have attachment, we can't stand to see the suffering, so we get so freaked out. So at least when we begin to understand impermanence and suffering is part of life, and then that will calm us down and then help us just become loving and give what we can give them, the power of the Dharma, the power of mantra, the power of sound, the sound of the mantras. For the animal, for example, you can't do better for an animal than that. Do you understand?
Thank you.
Okay, Andrew, thank you so much. Yes, Maddie.
Yes, thank you, Venerable Robina. I have a situation where today I found out a doctor could have killed me.
Sorry, and say it again, what? Sorry, what?
I have a situation where a doctor could have killed me.
What do you mean?
And if I had done nothing about it, then I could have gone, what is it called? When you get infected and the infection kills you. Now, if I do nothing about it, this doctor has the opportunity to cause suffering for others and create tons of negative karma for himself.
Sorry, Maddie, okay. Have you noticed the world? Have you noticed that people rape, kill, drop bombs, murder, steal? Have you noticed it?
I absolutely have, yes.
Okay. Well, Maddie, how come you're not saying this? And 20 years ago when you saw the people being harmed by bad doctors, it's only when it's you being harmed, we get all noble and think it's for the sake of others. Rubbish, Maddie.
I thought so. Absolutely.
Right. So just know it's your damn karma, have compassion for this doctor and work on your mind. And just keep practicing the path, dear, for God's sake. I mean,
thank you so much.
And this is so blunt of me when I say this, but you listen to this. I'm not being rude, but the only time people ever get upset about what the doctors or what the world does, we're going to start. People have been harming others since the beginning of this time. We couldn't care less.
Oh, no. I feel powerless. It's almost like I feel powerless otherwise. Until it comes around to me, I don't have the opportunity to say or do anything about it because nobody cares.
No, now I'm getting lost, Maddie. What are you talking about?
It's like, I don't know how to describe it. I feel like I could say anything I want about the situation, but because nothing has happened to me, I have no say in the matter. So now that the situation has come around to me.
I don't understand the point at all that you're talking about. It's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about that approach at all.
Okay.
So someone harmed you. Maddie, join the universe. People harm each other all the time.
Right.
So so you're a Buddhist, so interpret it. What is the call?
I'm just trying to interpret it in the most compassionate way I can possibly imagine.
You start with karma, Maddie. You start with karma, precious.
Okay.
Nothing happens to us if we haven't caused it. So one of the major first learnings is about karma. You're the cause of this. The doctor is the catalyst. So yes. You've got to apply all these things. And then the point is, if you've got compassion, for whom? Whom you haven't got compassion for? Not the doctor.
For all sentient
beings. Vague idea of compassion for other people is just rubbish, Maddie.
But it's incredible. I'm still alive, that I have the karma to be here still. It's incredible that he has the karma to have not done it. So it's good.
In order to understand this a bit more, though, when you mean he could have killed you, what do you literally mean? Just
I
say,
have a stitch. I had a stitch in my belly for about a year that could have easily gotten infected and killed
Maddie,
me.
please stop. Did he do it intentionally? No, he didn't, did he? Things
I
happen.
don't know. I can't
God
know.
almighty, Maddie, he's not some psychotic. He might be a psychotic. If he is, get him imprisoned. I agree with you. But these things happen all the time. People suffer all the time. People suffer more in the hospitals than they do out, practically. Maddie, come on, come down to earth. We're talking the compassion wing here.
Yes.
No, nothing happens to you. First, karma is the teaching, then karma and impermanence, and now
Yes.
compassion. You can do something to help it change, but don't say so he stops harming other people. I'm sorry, it's not like that.
Yes. Yeah. I understand.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Venerable.
If you were someone else asking, I'd answer in a different way. But you're a serious practitioner.
Yes.
So then
And it's
act like a practitioner and think like a practitioner and apply karma, impermanence, suffering, be delighted you purified some negative karma, have compassion for the doctor, and get on with your life. And meanwhile, keep practicing.
do we worry about the karma that others accumulate?
Jesus God, Maddie.
No. Okay.
Only when it concerns you. That's the only time we so-called worry. When you've got proper compassion, Maddie, you'll have more compassion for the harmers than the harmed. That's what drives the Bodhisattvas to never give up working for others. They have more compassion for the harmer than the harmed, because the harmed have just finished their karma. The harmer is just beginning it.
I agree.
Okay,
Thank you.
good. Anybody else got a question? Yes, Eileen.
Venerable Robina, it's hi, good evening.
Yes.
I just wanted to add, you've been teaching us the last 3 weeks, generosity and morality and patience. And now we're talking about calm abiding. It would seem to me, if you experienced deep calm abiding, you would automatically feel those things, no? Or
No way, absolutely.
no.
That's why the first stages of practice, Eileen.
Yeah.
Okay, if you're on the first stages of the path and your goal is liberation, this is one of the goals that Buddha teaches: liberation from suffering and its causes. That's the Theravadan teachings. And so the whole goal there is to get out of suffering. The whole goal, and that is what's considered to be the only goal most of us can accomplish, this goal of achievement of nirvana, of liberation from suffering and its causes. So if you're practicing, so you go to junior school, you practice the first scope, you practice abiding by the laws of karma, you live in vows, you purify your karma, you go to the next level, you do the job of getting renunciation, you get single point of concentration, and then in that concentration, which we're going to talk about next week, you realize emptiness and you cut the root of all suffering. Now, think about how you would be. You would have, because you've rid the mind of delusions, so you are right, you'd have unbelievable levels of love. You'd have all those qualities. You're absolutely right, Maddie, Eileen, you are exactly right. You'd have unbelievable love, compassion, because the delusions have gone, and levels of compassion that we can't even imagine. At the time you die, your bliss and your goal of getting out of samsara override your love and compassion, and you don't come back. So the levels of love and compassion that you can accomplish on the Bodhisattva path are even hard to imagine. And so hard to imagine. So it's not as if you don't get love and compassion before. You do. You're exactly right, Eileen. Even on the level of working in renunciation, as you get less deluded, you get more loving, you get more compassion. There's no question. But the levels of love and compassion on the Bodhisattva path are like 1 billion times more stronger, 1 billion times more intense, 1 billion times more amazing. It's hard to find words for them. And then that compassion is what drives you to want to get concentration, to want to realize emptiness, so you can become a Buddha. Does that make sense?
Yes, and in a way, is it true then that in order to practice intensely, going into meditation, you couldn't even achieve calm abiding if you weren't doing the first few steps?
So I missed that. Say it again.
In other words, in order to even experience calm abiding, you have to go through these other
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Dangerous.
Yes, you can't, yeah, absolutely. You can't avoid it. You can't have calm abiding if you haven't controlled your mind. You can't have, you can't get calm abiding, and not to mention realizing emptiness without understanding the mind very deeply and getting renunciation, which means you've given up attachment, you've given up rage and anger and despair and depression, and you've controlled your body and speech. Could argue that, you know, due to past karma, you could get it quite quickly, but then you'll forget all about the suffering of others because the bliss is so intense. That's what, I mean, we can't conceive of this levels of bliss and joy, you know. You understand?
Yes, I do.
It's a tricky one.
Thank you.
Yes, I mean, as Renee said, just to even get to the mountains, to be prepared to get concentration, you've got, he implied, you've got to be so developed already, given up attachment, not care about food, not care about reputation, have nothing else to do. Already you're highly qualified. So yeah, you can't get it unless you've got some very special past karma. And then if you do get it, I mean, there's stories about, you know, one tantric practitioner who was so attached to the bliss that he got in his meditation. His deity was Yamantaka. He had so much attachment to the bliss that he experienced in meditation that he ended up being born as a preta, as a spirit looking like Yamantaka. So there's many stories of how dangerous meditation can be, because some people have karma from past lives, and many people have incredible bliss. I remember a fellow in prison who had natural ability to get single point of concentration for hours. He really, because he didn't, but he was so deluded. He did not understand about delusions. He really thought he was enlightened. You know, he'd lost his mind. So that can be because you've got past karma with meditation. And it's attachment to it that destroys you. Or and also, as Lama Yeshe says in here, many people go off to meditate and end up in a psychiatric hospital because the mind is such a powerful thing. And if you haven't studied the mind and haven't got some basic practice, you've got no idea why things happen, and you can lose your mind completely. So it's crucial to have the earlier stages, your renunciation, fundamentally there before you get anywhere near it, you know. Do you understand?
Yes. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else? Oh, my battery's running out. Oh, no, it's not. Low battery. It's okay. Anybody else? Questions? Erin, talk to me. Yes, sweetheart. Can't hear you, darling. Unmute.
Sorry.
Yes.
I just was wondering, this all seems so far out of reach for someone like me.
For me too, darling. Don't worry about it. It does. But it's kind of, but Lama's trying to encourage us to know that the potential is there. Surely if you're like, you've never been to the gym and you see somebody who's fit and marvelous, it would inspire you, not depress you. It shows you your potential. So that's the approach to it, to try and think, wow, I've got this potential, have I? And then you take one step at a time, Erin. That's the right approach to it, not to feel, oh my God, I can't do it.
Well, where do I start? Like, I mean, other than meditating, like where would you
start on the Buddha's path? You haven't got to practice now, you mean?
Sort of, from a lot of different, you know, here and there stuff.
No, I understand. So that's, yeah, I know. So in that, so if it's, yeah, I understand what you're saying then. So that's where you just got to find, you know, you're coming to some teachings, you got to get the appropriate books, and you got to find, first of all, you got to find your path. I mean, you know, you're hearing teachings in this framework, you might hear some teachings somewhere else. You got to sort of listen to different teachings, think about it, go to different places and check up where you feel it's the right place to be. And then you start kind of starting somewhere, and you know, you can get a daily practice and you go from there. So do you feel that you've got some sense of comfort in the teachings you've discovered so far, or you're not sure about it all? Where are you at with that?
I do, but I have like Theravada teachers too, or Dharma talks, and so they don't teach the same thing.
No, you're totally right. So this is where I would suggest, Erin, you just keep moving, sweetheart. You've got to find where you belong. You might find that that's the path best for you. You have to just keep, my first suggestion is don't panic about it. It's all right. Just listen to some teachings, read some books, do a bit of practice until you feel where you found the kind of the teachings that suit you. You've got to keep moving because you're the one who's got to decide what's right for you, darling. So just keep going and listen to the teachings, try to put it all together. It seems, I mean, there's an awful lot of stuff. It can be very confusing. I agree. and just go one step at a time. What do you think? Does it make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, it does. It's very appealing to be powerful enough to end suffering for other beings in the way that you speak.
I understand.
That's something that I would love to do, but it seems so far away, and I'm not sure how to start.
I know. Well, that's where I'm saying to you. I don't want to say, I mean, you said you got some Theravada teachings as well. So that's just what I'm saying is just keep aspiring. This is the practice I'd say for you. This Dalai Lama always says, always aspire, always want to do what is most beneficial. So what I'm getting at is this: for you, you haven't quite found where you belong on your path yet. You haven't found your path. That seems to be what you're saying, right? So then you've just kind of, for me, the analogy is you're walking on a take care of whoever you're with. You just aspire, you think, I'm not sure where the turnoff is. I mean, this is what you're really saying. You're not sure which is your path. There's no point in chewing it like a dog with a bone. You just think every day, you do a bit of practice, what you know already, you do some meditation in the morning, and then you have this aspiration. I'm not what the right thing to do is. I'm not sure where the turnoff is, but I'm just going to go one step at a time, and may I always do what is most beneficial. So you don't know what it is, but then that thought will guide you. And then, depending on the karma you've got with particular groups or the particular approach, you're going to find where you belong, sweetheart. So I just think you're doing perfectly as you are. Just keep moving. Do some practice every day. Listen to teachings here. Go to other teachings, and slowly it'll start to fall into place, and you'll get clear where you belong and what your path is. What do you think?
Okay. Well, one more thing, like I am getting kind of older, and like if I
yeah.
like I don't have all the time in the world. If I do, when I do end, like, how do I know I'll find my way again next time around?
Because it's like if you're practicing music, you do it as well as possible today, which means you'll play it well tomorrow, which means you'll play it even better the next day. So you program yourself for your next life. We are the ones who create ourselves. According to the Buddhist teachings about karma, there's no creator. It's not just good luck and bad luck. So by you practicing morality, living on the path, living in, let's say when you do commit yourself to a path, maybe it's Buddhism, you take refuge, you live in vows, you do your purification every day. You're programming your mind, darling, and you'll get the exact next life that you have created in this life.
Okay.
We're in charge, baby.
All right. Thank you, Venerable.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
So just keep checking on teachings, check on teachers, and you'll get clear. But every day think, may I do what's most beneficial? May I find my path? May I become clear? They're not just wishful thinking. That's very clear thoughts you've got that will program your mind. You'll find your way. No problem. You will.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Be
Great.
brave. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, darling. What else, people? Anything else? So concentration, basically. I mean, Lama Yeshe just tries to get us excited. He tries to get us enthusiastic, to show us our potential. Sort of the goal of it, of course, is not to get bliss. The whole purpose. So the whole purpose of this technique, the bliss is like a bonus. Clarity and the sharpness of the mind, because that's what we need to get the sixth perfection, to get insight into the ultimate way that things exist. The level of mind has to be so sophisticated, so subtle, so clear, which is what you get from samadhi. That's the level of mind that's capable of unpacking and unraveling the nonsense and getting to realize emptiness, which we're going to talk about next week. That's the real purpose of it. The bliss is like a bonus, it's just showing us the potential of our marvelous minds. And that's why Lama Yeshe would try and give us this courage, because we don't talk like this in our culture. We don't think we've got potential. So to hear it is like a revelation in a way. But the purpose of concentration is the sixth one, so you can finally get to unpack and unravel the nonsense in the mind and get to realize how there is no intrinsic self, which is this final teaching of the Buddha. So also no, never mind. Don't worry about that. Come on then. What else, people? Questions?
Yes, this is Carol.
Yes, Carol.
It would seem there's some parallel between equanimity and mindfulness and calm abiding.
That's an interesting point. So you just tell me what which equanimity are you describing?
That ability to stay within, I want to call it sort of the neutral state, where you are not being bombarded constantly by.
Good. I understand.
Yes.
And the second one, where you said equanimity, mindfulness, and then concentration.
Calm abiding.
Okay.
I'm looking at.
I understand totally. So, okay, the first levels of practice, in the first levels are, because we're so out of control, our mind's out of control and our body and speech are out of control. So the very first level of practice, Buddha exhorts us to discipline our body and speech. Not even discussing the mind yet. He's not even discussing the mind yet. He gets us to calm down our body and speech and at least stop harming others. Control over our crazy berserk being, you understand? The contentment. Now you go to the next level of practice, and he now gets us to get to the mind itself, where you really start to get renunciation. And the equanimity you're describing is absolutely what you would get there, because you're trying to calm down the attachment and the anger and the jealousy and all the crazy emotions that drive us from pillar to post. So you could definitely say you would have that very marvelous, and it's not, I mean, it makes us a bit nervous because it sounds like it's boring, but it's not boring. The mind will be super content and you wouldn't be berserk, Go to the Bodhisattva path. And now we focus on getting all this incredible love and compassion and bodhicitta, and this courage to never give up to benefit others. And so then we get to the sixth, and then finally this concentration, samadhi, that, you see, again, like I said, in its character, it is a middle scope teaching. It belongs to the Theravadan. The first part of the path is the Theravadan part of the path. Do you understand what I'm saying here?
Yes.
Carol?
Yeah, I do.
So calm abiding actually is a Theravadan teaching, and so is emptiness. And they are in their character taught. And if you're on the Theravadan path, you'd do those then, and then you'd get out of samsara and you wouldn't come back. You don't go to the compassion wing at all. You don't do the bodhicitta one. But here they're delayed until the end of the path, the way they taught. So by this point, of course, you wouldn't just have equanimity that you're describing. You'd have unbelievable love and compassion and power to only want to benefit others. And that's the driving force. You've gone way beyond any possibility that your mind could be out of control by now. So then you're using in concentration meditation. So let me just discuss it. We've got 8 more minutes. So that basically the concentration meditation, calm abiding, the key thing you're trying to accomplish. So, okay, the two main, in those 9 stages, the 2 main obstacles that you're trying to completely eradicate are the tendency of the mind to be out of control. They call it the mind to be overexcited, which is the energy of attachment. And the other extreme is the mind to be completely dull. So that's what's preventing us. So now getting more and more control over these 2 extremes of the mind. States of mind that you're using hugely at this state, in the earlier stages of concentration, you're using mindfulness, using this ability to not forget what you're doing moment by moment. That's the massive one that you're using here. So the main states of mind you're trying to use in getting concentration are mindfulness, and there's another one called alertness. So these are 2 that you're employing all the time. So there you are, you're aiming to pay attention. Let's say you tried to concentrate on your breath. That's a simple example of a beginning meditation. Attention, there's many parts of the mind. We say, oh, I'm watching my breath. I'm meditating. It's too confusing to say it that way. What part of your mind is meditating? Well, let's say you're going to do a concentration meditation for 5 minutes. Let's say you're going to use the object of your breath. So what you're doing is a part of the mind called attention. It's one part of your mind. Pay attention. So attention is watching the mindfulness is constantly checking, if you like, to make sure that you don't forget what you're doing. And then alertness is even bigger than things. These parts of our mind, we don't discriminate, we don't distinguish them so precisely, but you're cultivating this ability to see these different parts of your mind and to utilize them. So it's very sophisticated, actually, and it's quite a this is mindfulness. You've got to use alertness. Now, at some point, as you get to the 5th or 6th stages, you've perfected mindfulness. You don't need to employ it anymore. You've got powerful concentration. And at some point, you perfect alertness until eventually you got this single-pointed concentration. So they're on the way to getting concentration. You with me?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a lot. It's a lot to absorb.
It is. It's very fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, it is intriguing. Thank you very much. That's great.
Yeah, keep going. Who else has something to say? Well, maybe that'll do. Okay, so next week we'll talk about special insight, which is the wisdom we have to cultivate to realize the ultimate way that things exist. And part of the problem with all of this is the terminology throws us. We get completely lost. And it's reasonable we get completely lost unless we study it. Haven't learned the language. So learn the terminology first and learn it. The words, which we'll go into next week. Time to go. Enough. So I think we just, with this concentration, you know, I mean, Lama tried to get us to give us courage, to give us confidence in the amazing potential of our own mind. That for me is the main purpose of that, just to and have the aspiration, maybe not this life, but maybe to have the aspiration that we get the conditions one day where we can actually get single point of concentration. How incredible. Think like that. Had in this last 90 minutes, as many thoughts as there've been, as many seeds we've planted. All these thoughts have gone in. We dedicate. Maybe we're going to nourish these seeds from this moment forward so that we can really become a Buddha like we motivated, so we can be a benefit to grow and grow in the hearts of all. Yeah, so I'll sing in Tibetan then. Kewadinyu dudang lama sangye drugyurne drowa chikyang malupa deisa ashok Jangchub Semchog Rinpoche, Makie Panam, Kegyochig, Kyepa, Mepa Yang, Gong Ne Gong Du Sho. Okay, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Eileen. Thank you, Erin. Thank you, Maddie. Thank you, everybody.
Venerable Robina, before we go,
Thank you.
Yes.
in relation
Yes.
to Erin's question about her practice, I dropped
Yes.
a link to Venerable Amy's new class, which is establishing a daily practice. It's in the chat box, and I sent it direct to Erin in case she doesn't know.
Well, Erin, I purposely didn't say all that to Erin because Erin needs to find where she belongs. I don't want to feed her.
Okay, sorry.
I don't want to
Okay.
sort of force things on top of her. Erin has to make her own decisions.
Yes, no, of course, that was just a
I
suggestion
very
because it was
purposely
so
didn't.
helpful. Sorry,
I beg your pardon? I know that, but I've
sorry,
got
it
lots
was
of
just so
class-
helpful.
I know that, but I've got lots of class.
Yes, I know, I'm sorry, I
It's
apologize.
okay. That's where you meant well, but maybe not much. Thank you, though, Jennifer. It might be the most perfect thing for Erin, so she can find out. She can decide herself. Okay, darlings.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. See you, sweethearts.
Thank you.